Let me begin by quickly running through the Craft Consortium papers again. You've seen me use them many times on my channel. This is the organic 12 by 12 paper pad. The range of greens makes it perfect for leaves and die cutting. And it also goes really well with one of the latest releases, which is the designer series. This is Through the Trees. You can see my other videos for further details on these projects. You can buy it in the 6x6 as well. Obviously you've got less paper to work with, but everything is scaled down, and you'll see just how well the colours work together with both of these paper ranges. Craft Consortium have also brought out a range of mirror card. It is 214 GSM, and we've got 3 beautiful new colours to play with, including the rose gold. Apologies for the glare on my camera, but obviously it's real mirror card, very high quality. Then we've got the gunmetal, which is a really beautiful bluey grey colour, and then we've got the copper, which is a really rich bold copper. And as you can see, these work really well with the papers that I'm just about to make some cards with. I've already made a set of cards, and I'll leave you the link above for the first video where I work through various cards. So I've got quite a few scraps left over, and I wanted to make a trio of cards incorporating these scraps and the beautiful new mirror card. So you can see that I'm working tone on tone. It's all shades of green, and I think that the organic papers will really lift up against the Through the Trees and against the mirror card. You can see the golds and the bronzes running through the papers, so I think it will work as a really good matte and layer. I'm making 3 5x7 cards, and I'm going to begin by cutting down a matte and layer using the rose gold, and from there I'm going to cut down several strips of the paper to 1 inch in width. At this stage you can measure a centre point, but I'm really doing this by eye. The only thing that I really want to focus on is leaving a 1mm line gap between each one of the papers. So from this point it's a matter of lining up the 1/8 strips on the perpendicular line to each other, mixing up the organic papers and the Through the Tree papers so that you've got a mix of patterns and colours. And don't worry if you run out of paper, you can simply cut off the ends and then finish off with a few of the excess strips. I found with this mirror card that you can use wet glue, and because it's such a good quality card, you can rub away any excess without leaving any marks, and that for me is a big bonus of this card. So now you've got all the strips in place, it's a matter of turning it over, cutting away the excess, and you've got the big reveal. And then I'm going to move on to rounding off the corners, which I prefer to do with my cards, and then matting and layering it with some foam tape to raise up the mirror card, and then finally I'll add the sentiments. Because postal costs have gone up, I am more conscious now of not adding too much bulk to my cards. However, it does make the card look a bit more professional when you add layers and you add a small layer of foam tape. So all I'm doing now is adding the mirror mat, and then I'm rubbing away any excess glue. It's almost like burnishing the card, and then I'm going to add in the sentiment. So that's card number 1. I'm going to start card number 2 in the same way. So I've got a copper matte, which is 1/4 of an inch smaller, and I'm just cleaning off the surface and rounding off the corners. And then I've got 4 squares that measure 2¼ inches by 3¼ inches, and I'm going to lay these in a pattern, round off just one of the corners so that it matches the matten layer and the card blank, and then I'm going to adhere these in place. There's a very small border. You want the copper mat to peek through the sides of the green, pulling it all together. And then once I've got these in place, I've got 4 square pieces of organic paper, and these measure 1½ inches square, obviously. And again, I'm rounding off the outer corner, and this time I'm adding some foam mats, just cutting down roughly a square to raise up those squares. You can see just how well the organics paper works against the pattern paper. It's always worthwhile having the ink drops range because you've got the whole breadth of colours. Organic and ocean I think are my firm favourites, but I like the way that I can incorporate them with my other collections. So finally I've got a 2-inch square, and I'm lining up the points so that they match the grid lines underneath. It creates a little bit of an illusion, and then finally I'll add a centre sentiment, rounding off the corners of the card, and then I'm going to adhere it with wet glue and leave it to dry. For card number 3, I'm back to using the thinner strips. It doesn't matter the length of them, but the width needs to be round about ½ inch. So I'm using a matten layer. I want to have the copper card as the base, and then I'm going to line up the strips, so even though the white card is going to be at an angle, the cards are going to be vertical. I'm using the grid lines on my glass cutting mat to line up each one of the vertical strips, putting some wet glue down, and then really randomly adding the different colours of the greens and the patterns. You can use it with smaller strips than this. I'm going to end up cutting some of these off, and then I'm going to go back in again until the entire strip is covered. For precise cutting, I find the Swan Morton scalpels really useful. You have to be very careful with them because they are meant for surgical procedures, but they are brilliant and very cost effective for working with paper cutting. Even though I was careful with my layering it up, it turned out that I didn't quite meet the ends of the white card, but not to worry, I'll show you how I overcame that little hiccup in a moment. So we're almost ready to put the card together. I'm just cutting off the excess of the band. And before I mat and layer the card itself, I'm going to bring in a stamp sentiment. So I'm a big fan of the Sizzix stamps. I'm using a new set called Sunnyside Sentiments, and I want to place that and add it to my stamping platform, which is a very useful tool for doing quick and professional sentiments. So I began with quite a bright green from the VersaFine Clair range. I began by using Green Oasis, but I decided against it. So I primed the stamp with the first green, and then I went back in and I used Rainforest, which is slightly more olive green, which perfectly matches the organic papers. And then it's a matter of bringing in the corner rounder, finishing off the card by adding the layer of copper mirror card first. I decided to use the double-sided tape because I wanted to have a really secure closing point on the sides of the card. So I over tape and then I cut away the entire card from the back, and this will give you a really clean and sharp point. I ended up with a little bit of wet adhesive, so I brought in a dry cloth and I was able to buff all of that away. Then I'm adding the patterned band, and it was at this point I realised that there was a very, very slight gap when I came to cut away from the back. I knew that it would bother me, so I cut another piece of green paper and I used my precision glue pen to add some more wet glue on the edge, and then I laid an extra large piece of the paper in place and I left it to dry with a stamping block on. And then I brought in my trusty scalpel and a metal ruler and carefully cut away the excess paper. And I'm glad that when I turned it back over, there was no sign of my minor error. So there's always a way round these things, you just have to be a little bit patient. So now the cards themselves are ready, I can bring in some of my favourite embellishments. I've got a whole range of colours. Some of these are mixed up from the Craft Consortium packs, but I do have a whole rainbow, and I like to use tonal colours against the papers that I'm using. So there's actually 2 or 3 shades of green, even though to the naked eye it looks like I've just got one pack of sequins. I'm using the precision glue gun to add a minor dot of glue, and then I'm working out how to create the triangle in order to draw your eye around the card. I want to leave white space wherever possible because that makes you look at the details. It didn't take long to produce this trio of cards. I think having good quality papers that mix and match together really does help with the process. Let me know in the comments below which one of these cards is your favourite, and do join me again for more crafting fun at Elisabeth Hogarth Designs very soon. Take care, bye bye for now.